Everybody. This is a video that is in memory of my brother and my father, our dad, who passed away a few years back. July 11th is always a special day for us in that that was the day that our father became sober. So July 11th throughout a lot of our life growing up was kind of a special day in that it was a day of celebration, not over the top celebration or anything crazy like that, but it was a time of definitely going to an AA meeting. If you don't know what an AA meeting is, that is stands for Alcoholics Anonymous, and my brother and I would attend these meetings, especially on July 11th, because our dad usually would take a chip, and that would commemorate just the amount of sobriety that he had, or he would speak and probably take around 25 minutes or so to share his story with those at the club, the Alcoholics Anonymous Club. So me and my brother were raised around this, and it was always a special time. And there was a lot of wonderful things that we gleaned from our dad in his sobriety. Some of my friends in Simi Valley, California, know my dad as someone who could help them and talk to them about sobriety. And one of the words that always comes up with our dad is that he was a safety. He was a safe guy. You could talk to him anytime about anything, and he wasn't gonna bat an eye, judge you in any way. He'd feel with you, and he would want to try to help you the best he possibly could. His door was always open to my friends and their dads, and so it was way cool to have Pop in life. So I like to usually go to an AA meeting on July 11th and just take some time and sit in on a 12 and 12 and kind of kick back and listen to the 12 and 12 being read. This year, I was just coming back into town and I wasn't able to do it. This week, I might be able to get some time and go to one of the local meetings just to sit there, just the club that he liked to go to when he did move to Tucson. And that's always neat for me to go and remember just him, just knowing that he sat in this room and this was a place that he talked and spoke in and invested in the lives of people. And that's another thing we got from our dad was the idea of investing in the lives of many people. Super special. I hope that is something that is reverberates in my life and in your life as well. That you're investing in the lives of someone, and that there's not a hate in the heart, but that there's a lot of love in the heart. Um, and my dad definitely had that. And I'm not sure how my dad would react to everything that goes on today. Um, we were raised super progressive with with our dad, and I don't think he would think maybe a lot of things today that are in the name of progressivism. I don't think he would see them as maybe being progressive at all. Um, but he loved Noam Chomsky, and he loved Howard Zinn and guys like that. Jack Kerouac. So if you knew my dad, he was definitely a classic piece of work. And so this is kind of in memory of him. It definitely is. So I want to read step one, and you can join with me if you want. But this is step one of the 12 and 12. So 12 steps, 12 traditions. And it says, step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have wrapped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol now becomes the rapacious, rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency, and will in our will to resist its demands. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. But upon entering AA, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation. We perceive that only through utter defeat we are able to take our first steps toward liberation and strength. Our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be a firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness we will find none at all, proved beyond doubt by an immense experience. This is one of the facts of AA life. The principle that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat is the main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. When first challenged to admit defeat, most of us revolted. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence. Self-confidence was no good whatever. In fact, it was a total liability. Our sponsors declared that we were the victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerfully that no amount of human willpower could break it. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of this compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out our increasing sensitivity to alcohol. An allergy, they called it. The tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. Few indeed were those who, so assailed, had ever won through. Indeed were those who are so assailed had ever won through in single-handed combat. Sorry, basically, few have ever won in single-handed combat. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources. And this had been true, apparently, ever since man had first crushed grapes. In AA's pioneering time, none but the most desperate cases would swallow and digest this unpalatable truth. Even these last graspers, often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually were. But a few did, and when these laid hold of AA principles with all the fever with which the drowning sea's life perseveres, they almost invariably got well. That is why the first edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our members was small, dealt with low bottom cases only. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. It is a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health and families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell. Wow. So it says they were spared the last 10 or 15 years of literal hell that the rest of us had gone through. Since step one requires an admission that our lives had become unmanageable, how could such people as these take this step? It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had to hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our own drinking histories, we could show that the years before we realized it, we were out of control, that our drinking, even then, was no mere habit, but it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters, we could say, quote, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? Bearing in mind, meanwhile, that are what you have been told about alcoholism, unquote. This attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, the person could never be the same again. Following every spree, he would say to himself, quote, maybe those AAers were right, unquote. After a few such experiences, often years before the onset of extreme difficulties, he would return to us convinced. He had hit bottom as truly any of us had. John Barleycorn himself had become our best advocate. Why all this insistence that every AA must hit bottom first? The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA's program unless they have hit bottom. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking. Who wishes to be rigorous, honest, and tolerant? Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone mediation and prayer, or meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this prospect, unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself. Under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA, and there we discover the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then do we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as the dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. Man, what a cool section for sure. This 12 and 12 step 1. Super cool. A lot of cool parallels, of course, to what I know as a minister of the gospel. And so when I read this, of course, I see a lot of similarities to the ideas that are in the scripture about needing to have a humility, and the way we walk in humility is with an honesty of the things that we fail in. And you know, seeing our dad go through this transformation in his life was nothing short of absolutely beautiful. Anybody who knew our dad before he went to AA you know, and then after would tell you just what a marvelous life-changing took place. Not just the sobriety, and I want you to understand this. It's not just the sobriety, but it's the change of heart. It's the things that are spoken of about those who realize their malady, is that there's something missing, and there's something that we're super scared of as human beings, and that's to be vulnerable and to move in that kind of vulnerability through what is spoken of in step 1 with this idea of confession and fearless, rigorous honesty. This idea of getting with people and sharing with people your failures. All of a sudden, someone's life, our dad, was changed like that, where he started sharing, like, hey, this is what I have battled, and this is what I continue to battle. And one of the things I think we learned through the life of our dad too is that there needed to be a heart change. That heart needed to be changed. That there was something greater needed than even just the putting down the booze. there needed to be a heart change, um, and 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 he sought that, and that's what going to meetings, or going to church, or a church just means assembly. A assembly, it's an assembly of people, it's a church in that sense of the word, that idea. But getting with people and sharing those things, um, that was the start of his life change. And I can remember like getting with him when we would have visitations with him before I ended up moving with him, because I did end up moving to our dad's house when I was around 14, 13, 14, and stayed with them until I went and got married and stuff. But um, just to hear him, I remember we would be driving up to Big Bear. If you don't know, our dad lived in Big Bear for a while and hung out with a guy named Stoney and Gary Calabrese, and these guys, these crazy AA crew people, and so many. And of course, his friend from home, Smitty, and who was getting sober not too long, I think, after Dad. And just he had a really neat crew of people. And just hearing him in the car talk about things he needed to work on, and talk about his failures and ask him for forgiveness, and that kind of dialogue was really radical and really special. I didn't realize until I got older, as a teenager, a older teenager, that I realized that a lot of people don't have that kind of a parent in their house, where someone who can share like, hey, I didn't do this right, and I did this wrong, and I mistreated this here, and I didn't do this here, and I have this, you might call it a shortcoming, an area where you fall short. And right, sin, it's the idea of sin, missing the mark, shortcoming, missing the what your desire, what you would like to see, but you don't see. And so Dad was using this kind of terminology, and we saw him also, this fruit that was produced in him was one of reaching out to people. And like I say, whether it was friends or whether it was family, their dads, or whoever, people in my high school, or that kind of thing, junior high, people that needing someone. My dad didn't have all the answers, but he definitely was willing. He was willing to extend himself and sit down with people. And that really taught us a lot of lessons too. And I certainly don't have all the answers. And there's certainly many flaws in my own life. And so many areas that, man, I wish I had better. I wish I had licked. I wish I had down. I wish I didn't mess up in those areas, those kind of things. But I get with people and I share my yuck, and I want to do a kind of follow in that example of my father, because I know the fruit that it produced in his life. It produced a beautiful love for people, compassion, where instead of looking at people and just being quick to judge them and quick to see them as evil, he looked at them, and man, he had now a compassion on people, and he wanted to look at them in a different way. And so that humility and all that vulnerability produced in him a mighty compassion on people. And he lived out the rest of his days just helping people. And certainly so. And if there was anybody that surrounded our dad, even in his death, up to his death, it was people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Those were his peeps. Um, those were the people that he um, was on his heart all the time. And AA definitely, the what was written in the 12 and 12 and the big book of AA definitely was something that he studied repetitively, along with other books as well. But he was definitely a student of this, and so many neat lessons from him. And I can go on and on and on telling story after story, because there's so many cool pop stories. Um, I miss so much about him. I know my brother does, and I know everybody, our mom, just everybody who loved Pat. He was just an awesome guy. Um, miss all the funky cookies that he would get, the dollar cookies, dollar, you get the whole pack for $1 with the, I don't know what was it was made out of, but it was definitely some funky cookies and just the cheapest ones you could buy. I miss just looking at his refrigerator inside it and just amazed that his gut could take all that stuff in. Um, you miss the smell. Of course, I don't miss all the cigarettes, that my dad smoked throughout the years, but certainly miss a little bit of that smell, just that little bit of that stench. Um, miss seeing his place that was so filled with just the stuff that he surrounded him. It was his sayings, the Serenity Prayer, all of his jazz CDs, classical CDs. He loved all kinds of music, Jack Johnson. I think when he died, I was there with him in his living room, and I think we had a little Jack Johnson on just playing, and that kind of thing. So he loved his music. He loved his baseball, big Giants fan. So miss those kind of things definitely with him. But the greatest thing about Pop was just sitting with him and just talking to him about sobriety and talking to him about life and working on things and hearing him talk through things. I mean, he definitely was a knowledgeable guy on many subjects, and one that you just never had. You didn't get really bored talking to him. He could talk about many subjects and certainly had a knack for history. If you know him, he definitely had a knack for it. So anyway, Dad's tombstone is in Maine. If people didn't know, we took him over to Maine, and he's buried alongside his brother and Uncle Gerald, my Uncle Gerald, and my Aunt Red, out in the grand state of Maine, the beautiful state. So it's great to see him over there, his tombstone, and that was his final burial place. So anyway, happy. I think it's got to be 38th AA birthday. I'm guessing it's around there, 38, maybe even 39. But one of you AA cronies can correct me for sure. So you guys take care. Thanks for listening, and happy B Day, Pop. Okay, bye bye.